Okay, well, let's get started. I'd like to introduce Robert McMahon, who is an expert in factoring accounts receivable, inventory finance, import-export trade solutions, purchase order finance, payroll finance, merchant cash advances, and equipment finance. He's president of Aegis Factors in Fort Myers, Florida, which has been in business since 1994, and that provides a service to small business. And Bob is a longtime expert, obviously, in the field. So, Bob, I want to welcome you to our Paper Source teleseminar.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay. Tell us, first of all, some of us know a little bit about factoring, but it's kind of an under-the-radar thing to most of us. Tell us about that, please.
I got involved in this industry in the early 90s, about 1992. And I happened to be in Las Vegas, and I met I was a stockbroker, and I met another ex-stockbroker that had moved on to the factoring industry, and he was brokering factoring transactions. And as we talked, and I got to know a little bit more about what he was doing, I realized that his industry was a lot better than mine. And of course, at that time, I was married, and I think that was about the first year I ever made six figures. And, of course, my wife was spending a little over six figures, so I really didn't have any opportunity to really get involved in the factoring industry. But years went on, and as time went on, I found myself with an opportunity, and I did around the early 1990s. It was a very similar profession to what I was doing as a stockbroker from the mechanical standpoint, from the sales standpoint. Everything I was doing, cold calling, giving workshops, direct mail with follow-up, all of that worked for being a stockbroker also worked for being a factoring broker. The only difference was there was more money in factoring than there was in stocks and bonds, believe it or not. So I became successful within about 24 months. I was again making into the six-figure mark. And then I decided I needed to take it to the next step, and I raised capital because I still had a lot of sources of capital. I raised capital, and I actually started a factoring company. I started buying the invoices rather than just brokering the invoices, which is what I do today. Now, as I get a little older, and I'm in my 60s now, as I look at retirement, I will retire back into the brokering side. The brokering side is a lot of fun. It's a great business. It's a wonderful, wonderful industry. Not very many people know about it. It's not a well-practiced industry. You know, when you take a look at Bill's industry, the mortgage note, discount note, cash flow industry, that is a very well-practiced industry. It's been around since the 80s, since the high interest rate periods of the 80s, when private financing really came into its own. It's been well practiced ever since. Had a couple of up periods, a couple of down periods, but there's always a lot of people that get involved in it because, number one, they know you can make some money in it. Number two, kind of everybody knows what a mortgage is, so it's not a difficult industry from a standpoint of education to get involved in. Well, when you get into commercial finance, which is where factoring and asset-based lending, purchase order finance, and a few of these other product areas, unless you've been a small business owner, that is not something you're too familiar with. You know, you've been a homeowner, you're familiar with a mortgage, and the concept of private financing is no big stretch. But if you've never run a business and never run into cash flow problems, if you've never been turned down for bank loans and had to struggle to find ready sources of capital someplace else in alternative financing, if you've never done that, well, you're not too familiar with it, so it's a little bit different. And it's not something you're going to be able to grasp without doing a little bit of training. So basically, what is it? When you get involved in the factoring industry, everybody calls it the factoring industry. In reality, it's the asset-based lending industry. There's a lot more products out there than just factoring when you get involved in it. Factoring, however, happens to be the big kahuna, and especially from the commission standpoint, because when you do refer a piece of factoring business, when you refer a small business owner to a factor, a lender, you as the broker of record will get commissions that are paid every month month after month, year after year, for as long as that factor has that small business entrepreneur on the books requiring financing. I've been factoring for years and years and years now, and it is not, I've had dozens and dozens of clients. Some referred to me from brokers, some that we just went out and got ourselves from our marketing. But we've had them for 6, 7, sometimes 8, 9 years. So if you were the broker of that piece of business, you'd be getting a monthly commission check for 9 years, you see. Factoring is affectionately known as the jewel of the asset-based lending industry for brokers for that reason, because you can literally build books of business over time that give you a very healthy monthly income. It's a bit different than, all of you are familiar with the note industry or are maybe just starting in it. Maybe you've been in it for years and years and years. The note industry is a very unique industry, and it's a lot of fun. And I think it's something almost anybody can do to some level, depending on how much you want to work. The factoring industry is kind of the same way. Where you will find the big differences is, number one, the products. When you get involved in the cash flow industry, mortgage notes in the cash flow industry, mortgage notes tends to be the big kahuna, whereas in commercial finance, factoring tends to be the big kahuna. This is where the money is. The note industry and the factoring industry, or the note industry and the commercial finance industry, rather, vary markedly, however, in the opportunities to really work and make it a full-time business. And the reason basically is this. When you're in the cash flow industry, for example, with a mortgage note, number one, you have to find somebody that has a mortgage note. Okay, so you got to find somebody that's been involved in private financing. Then number two, you got to find that person that not only has the note, but may want to sell it, you see. And a big piece of the industry is building your database of, number one, people that have notes. And even if they don't want to sell them today, well, things change. They go through divorce, businesses fail, they lose their job, whatever, and they may have to sell that note that maybe they inherited from their uncle in an estate or something like that. They may find themselves required to sell that note, and you want that in your database because you want them to sell it through you. You want to be able to help them. The commercial finance industry is different. Your ability to find prospects is like limitless. You can be a lot more proactive in marketing because your prospects are every small business in the United States. And there's roughly 27 million according to the SBA. Every small business, sooner or later, at one time or another, needs money. There is no question. They all need money. Some will be able to get it from banks and traditional bank financing, but the vast majority, roughly 80%, will not. Roughly 82% of all small businesses are turned down for bank loans. Now, in some instances, this causes the business to actually go out of business because they're cash-starved and they can't make it. They don't know about alternative commercial finance. They don't know about factoring. They don't know about asset-based lending. They don't know about merchant cash advances. They don't know. And there's really nobody out there to tell them about it other than the actual lender like me or those very limited number of commercial finance consultants you would call a broker, we call a CFC or commercial finance consultant, that is actively out there marketing to small businesses, basically saying, look, here I am. If you run short of cash, you can't get bank loans, we have alternatives. Give me a call, you see. This is really the job of the commercial finance consultant. And like I said, the difference is in the number of prospects that are out there. As a commercial finance consultant, for example, if you add commercial finance consulting to your quiver of arrows now that you have in cash flow, you will never wake up in the morning and say, what can I do today to get some business? What marketing can I do today to find a prospect? Because every small business is your prospect. Every one. So there's no limitation on your prospecting.
Well, I would imagine, Bob, that the current economy would only be good for this for asset-based lending.
Well, that's exactly right. This is one of those situations where, as bad as this economy is, and Bill can probably tell you this is better than I can, this is not going to get better, not for a long, long time. Regardless of what you hear, this is something that's going to be set in for a very long period of time. Banks aren't going to lend. They can't lend. They're capital impaired. They cannot do it, and they're repairing themselves, but it's going to take a long time to repair banking. So small businesses are cash-strapped, and you're also running into more and more people that have been employed, they've been in the job market, that can no longer find jobs, and they're forced because they want to eat. They're forced to go out and start a small business, and of course the banks aren't going to lend to them. So when they do somehow manage to corral some kind of startup capital, some kind of a grub stake, they'll run through that within the first 6 or 8 months of their business, and then they'll need more traditional business financing. Well, that's really where alternative commercial finance, your factoring, asset-based lending, purchase order finance, merchant cash advances, that's where that stuff shines, because of the way we lend, we can finance startup-type operations and very early-stage companies. You see, the banks, even in good times, banks won't touch them. See, so we can do that. So from a standpoint of brokering, when you get involved in the note business, I think one of the goals of almost all note brokers is to someday make enough money so that you can become a note buyer and actually, earn the interest off these really attractive mortgage notes. If you take a look at, bank financing or bank CDs right now, you're lucky to get 2%. Yet it's not unlikely you can get 12 or even 13 or 14, and Bill can tell you better than I can, but maybe even higher rates of interest in mortgage notes. So the goal is always to, get enough money to be a buyer. Well, most people, when they start, are brokers first because they have to earn some money so they can become a buyer, and then when they see a really great little note, before you know it, they start buying it themselves. That's what I did with factoring. I was brokering, and then I had some really small deals, little $5,000 a month, $7,000 a month deals, and I said, I can do that. I've seen the factors documents. I've seen the factors contracts. I'm going to do this myself. And that's how I got started as a factor, and that's how most people get started in buying the notes. They learn the ropes by brokering, and then they become a buyer. So this area...
Is there any license? Bob, for a moment, is there any licensing involved for brokers for factoring or any other?
The only licensing other than your normal business licenses, the only licenses are out in California. California, because California's broke and they're always looking for more money, California requires that brokers have a lender's license. Now, this is no big deal. There's no exam or anything you got to take. It's $100 fee for a lender's license, and you have to post a bond, and you can't be a convicted felon. You can't be a child molester or a convicted felon. So other than that, there's no big deal. There's no test, and that's the only state that requires anything. Everything else is wide open, you see. So it's a wide open industry. Now, if you take a look at our industry, and if you were to look at Europe, for example, being a broker for factors and asset-based lenders is a well-recognized profession throughout Europe, Germany, Great Britain, Italy. It is a well-recognized brokerage-type operation. Here in the United States, it is not. And then the reason is that our banking sector was always so well developed that there wasn't as big a call for it. You could walk into any bank and you could try to get a loan. And if you couldn't get a loan, they'd tell you why, and eventually you'd correct the problems and get a bank loan. In Europe, it's never been that way. The countries don't trust each other. The banks from one country to another don't trust each other. So there had to be something else. Well, there's factoring and asset-based lending and so on over there. For example, we do as much factoring here in the United States as Germany does. We do about 30% less than Italy. We do less than half of what Great Britain, the UK, does. So factoring's huge throughout Europe and also in Asia now. But factoring's big here. I mean, it's no small thing. It's the average person that doesn't run onto it may not know a lot about it, but it's a $150 billion a year industry here. So I don't know, for example, when you take a look at note buyers out there, when you take a look at actual note buyers, and Bill, I know, publishes every year a list of recognized note buyers, and Bill's an expert in this area. You've been around forever, so you know the note buyers are out there. And I think there's probably 25 or 30 note buyers at any given time in the note industry. In the factoring industry, there's over 500 factors alone. And then you add in asset-based lenders and purchase order finance companies, equipment leasing companies, and all of these various areas of alternative commercial finance. And there's thousands and upon thousands of lenders out there. So it's a very, very big industry when you start looking at the broad picture, you say. From a broker standpoint, the nice thing about getting in the industry is it's very similar to the note industry. You don't need to take these expensive courses. You don't need to take $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 courses, although I will tell you they are out there for factoring. There's one group out there that charges $25,000 for a couple of days. You do not need that. And I am a perfect example of why you don't. When I started back in 1990, there was no internet. Al Gore had not invented the internet yet. There wasn't any internet. So I couldn't go to the internet and get information. I knew it was a good business because I met the guy out in Vegas. But I couldn't get anything at all. So I finally stumbled onto a factor who was nice enough to send me a little information in the mail, and I literally did it by the seat of my pants, literally. Learned the ropes as I went with absolutely no training, and I was successful within 24 months. Today, with all of the information on the internet, if you're given a basic knowledge, and then you know then what to look for, the additional information on the internet is astounding. And being a broker is no different than being a broker in our industry is really no different than being a broker in the cash flow industry. In fact, you really, from the cash flow industry standpoint, you look at factoring and commercial finance as another arrow in your quiver, along with your note buying, and if you get involved in structured settlements or inheritance advances or all the various products that are in the cash flow industry, factoring can become just another area. Most important part of factoring, commercial finance, is the training. Now, I'll give you an example of a brokered transaction, and this is how simple it can be, and this is why the training is so important. We had a girl that brought us a deal. She was out having a cocktail with her girlfriend on a Friday night, and the girlfriend said, "Boy, can you cover me tonight? We didn't get paid today." So, what do you mean you didn't get paid today? And she said they just didn't have enough for payroll. So everybody's taking so long to pay, we just didn't have enough for payroll. And she worked for a janitorial service. It was a janitorial service. She said, "I'm going to get my check Monday, and I can, I'll pay you back, but can you give me $20 or $30?" And the girl she was telling this to had gotten some factoring broker training. And she said, "Well, that's not a big problem. Why doesn't your boss just get a factor?" And of course, her friend says, "Well, what's a factor?" And so she kind of explained this, and she said, "Look, would you mind if I talk to your boss? Would you, say, we can solve this problem for you really easy, and it doesn't involve credit, it doesn't involve a bank. We can solve it for you real easy." And long story short, after a week or so of doing a little begging and so on, she actually got an interview with the boss, who set up a conference call with us, and we brought her in as a janitorial client. Well, that girl, strictly by being in the right place, in this case a bar, but being in the right place at the right time, armed with a little knowledge. Now, I don't know, this is a pretty new account, but I'm going to guess her monthly check will be around $200 a month, or $2,400 a year, for that single account that she got, just being at the right place. But knowing what factoring was in this case, you see. So that's really, most of the people that get involved, that's kind of where they go. Now, some people, after they get a deal or two under their belt, will say, wait a minute, this is a pretty good deal. I think I want to do this more than just on an occasional basis. Instead of just being at the right place at the right time, I want to make some right places, and I want to make some right times. So they join Chamber of Commerce, and they join a couple of organizations, and they actively start marketing that business. And it's kind of like note brokering. We provide a basic factoring package. No factors train other than us, and we train more factoring brokers than anybody else totaled by far in the United States. And it's because our factoring program is so inexpensive. It's very inexpensive. We also provide note broker sites for the same reason. Being a factoring broker, being a note broker does not take a lot of money. It's not easy, and Bill will tell you, you cannot just sit back and wait for the business to walk in the door. You have to do a little bit if you're going to be do this on more of a full-time basis. But it does not take a lot of money. You do not have to go through these $15,000 training schools. For a couple $100, you can get good note broker training, you can get good factoring broker training, and then you have to put yourself out in harm's way. When I say harm's way, you have to go out there. You can't just sit in the house and stare at the Kardashians. You actually have to go out and do some networking, get involved in social media, put yourself out and join organizations. Join singles organizations, unless you're married. Don't join one if you're married. Your wife won't like it. Your husband won't like it. But get involved in any kind of organization that puts you out amongst people. It is impossible for you to be out and about networking and not stumble into a conversation just like this girl did that brought us the deal for janitorial service. It's impossible for you to be out there all the time and not run into the occasional situation like that. See, it's impossible. And if you know, because of a little bit of training, if you know the solution to the problem, in this case, a cash flow problem, if you know the solution and you can get an audience, all you have to do is convince in our case, the business owner, that, hey, we may have a solution for you. Would you be interested in a conference call with one of our underwriters? You then set them up with a conference call, and it's you, them, and somebody like me on the conference call. We do all of the selling for you. We do all of the contracting for you. You have absolutely no paperwork to do. All you get paid simply for being in the right place at the right time, armed with enough knowledge to recognize the solution to the problem, and then lastly, recognize who to send it to. What type of lender can solve this problem? Is it a factor? Is it a merchant cash advance provider? Is it a purchase order finance company? Is it an equipment lessor? What is it? You see, that's the job of the broker, or what we call the commercial finance consultant. So, kind of in closing, I would say that this for what y'all are doing, getting involved in the note industry, and I applaud you for this because, in today's economy, if you have a job, you're lucky. If you have a job that you're not worried about losing, you're really lucky. Everybody should be looking at alternative sources of finance, alternative income streams. Even if you've got a great job, if you're not looking at doing something else on the side that can cushion the fall in the event of job loss, medical problems, whatever, you're foolish. You need to do something. So, both these industries are almost tailor-made for this because they're inexpensive to get into. And they're very easy to enter at your own pace. When you get some spare time, get more involved, and learn more, constantly learn more in the cash flow industry. Learn more about all the various types of income streams that are out there. I know I get Bill's Paper Source newsletter, and I learn stuff all the time out of that newsletter. There's great articles in the newsletter. If you guys aren't getting that newsletter, get it. It's a great newsletter. And get involved in some of these income streams. I know occasionally Bill will ask me to write a small article on factoring, which we do for the newsletter. Okay. Now, from our standpoint, we have a complete training program that's under $200. And you can also learn a lot about brokering factoring transactions by going to LinkedIn. There's a factoring broker discussion group on there. And we also have one on there called the IACFB, which we just started, which is our training arm. We have our own training arm at IACFB. Now, Bill has asked me to give a presentation in April at the symposium, which I'm going to do. I'm going to give about a probably 2-hour presentation on factoring and alternative commercial finance. And I'll be hanging around there all day, so if you all come to this symposium, you want to ask me questions and kind of pin me down on some of these things, I'll be glad to answer those questions. I started out just like you. I started out with absolutely no knowledge of this industry and built it up to something pretty good. And I, although I came with some pretty good skills from the stockbroker community, being a stockbroker, these were skills I had to develop as a stockbroker too. So really, there's nothing about this industry that everybody can't do to some extent. If they kind of apply themselves, if they're willing to put in a little bit of sweat equity, they can do it. And the rewards are so great if you become good at it. The costs are so low to participate that I tell almost everybody, take a look at it, learn more about it, put the knowledge in the back of your mind, and if you get involved in a situation where this knowledge is going to pay a dividend in the form of a commission, you can thank yourself for spending a little bit of time gathering this knowledge. This is good stuff, real good stuff. So I think I'll leave it at that and turn it back over to Bill. And if you want to open it up for questions, that's fine now. Or
thank you, Bob, for the plug on the PaperSource Journal. I appreciate that. And if you want more information about that, it's papersourceonline.com. PaperSourceOnline, all one word, .com. Bob mentioned our Note Symposium in April, April 26 and 27. You can get more information at the website papersourceseminars.com. Here is a question that's come in who says, very interesting. It's from Morgan. As Bob said, if we can refer a business to him and we are the middleman, we would get a portion of the monthly payments. Just curious approximately what percentage or amount would one expect for this?
Yeah, typically the industry standard is 10%, and the way this works in factoring, you understand every type of asset-based financing has a different method of payment. Factoring, which is known as the jewel of the industry, is known because of the way we pay every month. And for example, if you've got a print shop that your local printer is talking to you and lamenting the fact that his bills are coming in slow and blah, 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 and let's say you refer that to a factor like me, and let's say he's doing $100,000 worth of printing, commercial printing a month with the city. He's printing traffic tickets, we'll say, and the city's paying in 30 days, and that's causing him a problem because he's got to buy more paper and ink, and he's got to pay his employees and so on. Well, a typical factoring rate runs about 2.5% for 30 days. So let's just say that they're out for 35, 38 days, and the fees run 3% for 35 days or 30 days. At $100,000 in invoices a month, the fee will be $3,000. Now, that's about the same as taking credit cards, by the way. If somebody were to pay with a Visa card, it'd probably be about $2,000 to $2,500 just to pay with a Visa card. So factoring is not expensive. It's not expensive at all, as long as you can manage the time that stuff's out. But let's just say the factoring fee was $3,000 a month. You, as the broker, would earn between $300 and $450 a month. You get between 10 and 15% of that, depending on how good a broker you are. Most factors start you at 10%. If you're sending them more than the occasional piece of business, they'll be elevated to 15. We have at Aegis Factors, we have a grid. But you can see, if you go to aegisfactors.com, you can download our broker's package, and you can see the grid, the sliding scale of fees. We pay you, as the bigger your check, every time your check goes through a kind of a level, we add a percent, a bonus type to your payment. But generally speaking, you'll get between 10 and 15% of the factoring fees earned. So if the factor earns $3,000, you're going to get between $300 and $450 a month. So that single account, that single, in this case, print shop account, would be worth between $3,600 and $5,400 a year to you. So you have to ask yourself the question, how many accounts do I need before I'm making six figures, you see? Generally speaking, if you take a look at brokering, if you get to $2 million a month in receivables being factored, so you got 10, 15, 20 clients, and all small, no big ones. We're not talking about a nice big juicy guard service that's doing $700,000. We're talking about a little $100,000, $125,000, $75,000, small businesses. You'll generate a six-figure income at about $2 million. I've got one janitorial service. I do some brokering. If I get a deal, for example, in California, I got a deal that I sent out to a California factor just because the time zones are a disaster. Trying to finance over a 4-hour period. 4-hour time zone change is awful. 3-hour time zone change. So I sent that out to a factor, and it's about $130,000 account I set out there, and it's been about a year and a half ago. I get a check every month for almost $900, but somewhere between $700 and $900, I guess, is my broker check on that. So that one, for me, that one client is about $8,000 a year. Okay. So it's very lucrative from that standpoint. Very, very lucrative. You know, it takes you a while to build your business up, but once you've built it up, then it's a maintenance issue. Occasionally you're going to lose a client. You need to be able to replace them. So you need to be able to maintain that level of income. So.
Bob, we're getting a lot of questions, and I know we can't stay on too long. I'll try to get to as many as we have time for. One question is they wanted the website for the April symposium that you're going to be teaching for us. That's Paper Source Seminars, all one word, papersourceseminars.com. And they also wanted to know your website for your where they can learn more about factoring.
Well, our training website is the IACFB. We've got our own training organization, which is the International Association of Commercial Finance Brokers. Well, that's us. That's private. You know, it's our own private deal. And that is www.iacf as in Frank, B as in boy, .org. Yeah. And you can, and as a matter of fact, if you go to iacfb.org/professionals, plural, PROFESSIONLAS, .htm, iacfb.org/professionals.htm, you get a little presentation and some links. And I'm not trying to sell you any training courses or anything, although when you take a look at it, we've got a great training course. And actually, I think you can get the training course. I think Bill has had our training course in his store for some time. You got to kind of point it out, but it's in there.
Yeah.
So you can learn more about the IACFB training course. The IACFB training course is we give you the Broker's Guide to Factoring, which is a great book. It's 175 pages. We give you a great factoring website. It's a template, but we customize it for you. And then we give you access to the training campus, what we call Campus IACFB, which is the back end of the IACFB. And that's where all of our training information is. And we have samples of brochures where you can actually print brochures out, you know, flyers. We give you, if you're going to do some cold calling, we give you scripts. We give you sales letters. All types of marketing materials. We even have like PowerPoint presentations if you want to do a workshop for small businesses, which I used to do. This is how I built my business very quickly, because I was always giving seminars as a stockbroker, so giving workshops to small business owners was a no-brainer. I used to use slides back then because they didn't have PowerPoint. Now we've got PowerPoint presentations, booklets to hand out. Everything is back there for your marketing, plus all the training for brokers. So there's a ton of information back then. Ton of information.
And as Bob pointed out, you know, he's in the factoring investment business, the asset-based lending industry, and you know, he's not trying to make thousands and thousands of dollars from these guys that go around, you know, with the infomercials, and they all they do is teach the seminars, and that's how they make their money, and they're not even in the business. They, you know, some of them don't. Some of them think discounted paper means that Safeway's having a sale on Charmin. So, you know, a lot of these guys. But Bob wants, you know, obviously he wants to train you to make money and bring deals to him, and it's in his interest to make the cost of the training as low as possible. So you'll get into it and do it, and you'll both make money, which I think makes a whole lot of sense. That's exactly right.
And Bill knows. I've seen a lot of Bill's articles on this. You do not need these expensive training schools. You know, I mean, if I was going to do this, I'd be charging $5,000 or $10,000 if I was going to do it just for training. But like Bill says, see, we're a finance company. If you send me one deal a year, we will both make a bunch of money. So do I have time to sit down with you and train you by yourself? No, I don't. Wish I did, but I don't. So we created IACFB as our training arm where we can provide a whole lot of training for literally next to nothing and get you up and operating. You know, we give you the training, we give you the website, we give you the Broker's Guide to Factoring, which is really a great book. It's everything you'll need. And then, what you add is the work. You add the sweat equity. So make it whatever you want to make out of it. But even like I said, even if you get one deal a year, one good deal a year can easily add $5,000 to your income, just stumbling onto a deal. But the key to it is when you stumble onto it, recognizing that it's a deal and then knowing where to send it. You see.
Let me get to some other questions. Several questions. The same question is, please explain again the license requirement for California for this.
Yeah, in California, they look at you, even though you're a broker, and there's no risk to this whatsoever as a broker. It's got nothing to do with anything. Even though you're a broker, they want you to get a lender's license, the California lender's license. And the cost of the lender's license, I think, is like $100. It used to be. It's very inexpensive. California just wants the fee. Okay. Now, in order to get that, there is no exam you have to take. It's not like a mortgage broker's license or anything like that. You have to post a $25,000 bond. They want you to know that you're worth $25,000. So whatever the bond cost is also not very expensive at all. It's next to nothing. And then they have to do a criminal search to make sure that you're not, Son of Sam or something out there. As long as you don't have a felony conviction, it's not going to be an issue at all. And then you get your California's lender's license, and you can operate in California. California is the only state that has that. The only state. Everybody else is recognizes brokering for what it is. It's got nothing to do with lending. You can't cheat anybody out of money. You can't take advantage of anybody. All you do is refer clients to lenders.
And again, Bob, if you would take a moment to give them your contact information again, that would be helpful.
Yeah, you can always get us through the contact page on the IACFB, or you can get us through the contact page at Aegis Factors, and that's www.aegis, and that's A as in Apple, E as in Egret, G as in George, I, S as in Sam, Factors, FACTORS.com. You can always just go to the contact page, and you can always reach us there. And there's also, if you get into that Aegis Factors, you can download brokers agreements, company profiles, and things like that will help you, early on, help you get a little bit more informed about our industry. Our industry is really neat, and even if you don't, buy our training package or anything like that, that's okay. You don't need that to send business to us. You only need to understand what factoring is, so that you're sending factoring business to a factor, and you're sending purchase order business to a purchase order finance company, an asset-based lending business to an asset-based lender, you see. So, and you can learn a lot about that right on the internet. It's all out there if you kind of know what you're looking for.
Great. Well, Bob, I look forward to seeing you in April at our Note Symposium in Las Vegas, and thank you very much for taking your time to be with us and share your insights on our teleseminar today.
You're more than welcome, Bill. I appreciate you having me.